Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. Are you a cop? Actually, are you a cop is a point of contention, and it's an old wives' tale. But it's one of those things that I get asked all the time, and I see it pop up all the time. And it's the idea that if you walk up to somebody and ask them if they are a cop, they must tell you if, in fact, they are a cop. And it's not true. Like I said, old wives' tale, urban legend, whatever you want to call it, but it's in the movies, and it's one of the most often repeated but mistaken legal concepts in America. Don't know how it is in other countries, but in America, there are police officers, law enforcement officers, LEOs, LEO, law enforcement officers. And they might be your local police, they might be county sheriffs, they might be state troopers, they could be, FBI, they could be all kinds of different people empowered by the government to enforce the laws. And as you know, there are police officers who wear uniforms, okay? And then there are undercover cops. And an undercover cop is a police officer who is acting in an official capacity, doing some kind of investigation, but not wearing a uniform. And part of what they do when they're not wearing the uniform is they don't act like cops because they think they might be able to figure something out, observe something that they couldn't observe while wearing a uniform. They could infiltrate an organization. We've heard of stories about cops who go undercover and work their way into the mob or something. A lot of movies about this kind of stuff. And so one of the funniest things of all is that there's this belief in America among people that if you see somebody who's acting like a cop but isn't in a uniform, you can ask them, "Are you a police officer?" And the old wives' tale is that they have to tell you. So if they tell you they're not, then you can do whatever you want because they can't arrest you because they've somehow violated some double secret rule on this. And that's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Now, here's the thing. Generally speaking, disproving a negative is difficult. There's no law that you can point to that says, a police officer who is undercover, is empowered to deny being a police officer. Because why would they write that law? Why would you don't write things into the law that are just common sense and so on. But there's other ways to explain this that I can point to. So, for instance, I've told you in a video I did that the police do not have to tell you why you've been arrested. Okay, so a police officer can walk up to you and say you're under arrest, and you've seen the videos on YouTube. If you haven't, spend 3 minutes, but don't spend too much time; it'll really tick you off. But you can find videos on YouTube where people get pulled over by the police. They get in a confrontation. They say, "I need to know why I've been pulled over. I need to know why you're ticketing me. I need to know what I've done wrong." And the police can tell you. And there are some states where the state actually has a law that says if you are being arrested, they must tell you why at the time of the arrest. Very, very rare though. And that's a state law, not a constitutional right you have. And as I pointed out previously, there's a case called Devon Pack versus Alford, written in 2004 by the U.S. Supreme Court. Opinion drafted by Scalia. Okay? And Scalia was known as a conservative justice, despite the fact that there are people out there who think when I mention that I'm talking about them, even though you're not on the Supreme Court. And Justice Antonin Scalia wrote, "Good police practice to inform a person of the reason for his arrest at the time he is taken into custody. It is a good police practice to do so. We have never held that to be constitutionally required." So in other words, the cops don't have to even tell you why you're being arrested if you're being arrested. But the question is, does a police officer have to tell you he's a police officer if you ask him? Well, it seems to me if they can arrest you without telling you why you're being arrested, to suggest, but yes, they got to tell you that they're a cop. If you simply ask them, seems unusual to have one and not the other. But I've also done videos on how the police are allowed to lie to you, specifically allowed to lie to you. And I've done an entire video on this, which I'll put in the link below. But the interesting thing is the myriad things they're allowed to lie to you about. So for instance, if they have you in custody and they're questioning you, they can lie to you and say, "We have physical evidence that connects you to the crime. We found your fingerprints. We've got eyewitnesses. We found your DNA. We found your wallet. We found stuff at the crime scene. We know it's you." They can lie about that stuff. And courts have said they're allowed to lie about that all day long. Doesn't matter. If you confessed as a result of them lying to you, that's that's your problem. they're allowed to give you a fake test. A police officer can walk in and hook you up to a device and go, this is a lie detector. The second you give an answer, they go, you just failed. They've taken that issue up on appeal, and higher courts have said, so what? They can give you a fake test if they want to. Why can't they give you a fake test? They can lie about witnesses. They can say, hey, we got 7 witnesses who placed you at the scene. They can put you in a lineup and say, you just got picked out of the lineup. Sorry. Now tell us what you did. And of course, they can lie about that. Again, specifically upheld by courts on appeal. And then likewise, they can lie about having a confession of a co-defendant or a person who's been arrested along with you, a proposed co-conspirator, I guess. They can actually arrest you and a bunch of your buddies, put you in separate rooms, and tell each of you everyone else has confessed and pointed at you. They can go tell the other person in the other room, everyone's confessed, pointed at you. And they can just do that until somebody actually does confess. Now they can say, hey, we got a confession we can use. So the point is, if they can lie to you about all this stuff, what makes you think they can't lie to you about being a cop? You walk up to a cop and go, are you a cop? And he goes, no. You then do something wrong and he arrests you. He lied. He said he wasn't a cop. So what? He arrested you for something you did. This bit about him lying to you, what would that do, by the way? He said he wasn't a cop and he was. I mean, what? So there would need to be a law on the books somewhere that says a police officer must identify himself to anyone who asks. Now, if you can show me that law, again, it's like the law saying there's no need for a driver's license. If you can show me the law, I'd love to see it. But as far as I know, no state in America has passed such a law. And so without such a law, then what you're talking about literally is a legend, a myth. And it doesn't make any sense. Now, I've had people say, well, Steve, I guess what they're getting at here is entrapment. In other words, let's suppose that you are a woman who, or I suppose a man. You're a person who works on the street selling your time and your company to lonely people who are willing to pay you for your company. And let's suppose that you're doing it in such a way that the local law enforcement views it as some kind of prostitution or something. And a person walks up to you and says, excuse me, what are you doing? And you say, oh, I'm down here working. And they say, oh, what kind of work do you do? And they say, oh, I will keep you company for money at an hourly rate. And my company might involve things that some people might consider to be illegal. And the gentleman says, oh, well, what will you do for me, to me, with me, near me, and so on, if I pay you a couple $100 in cash? And he pulls out some money. And you say, depends, are you a cop? And he goes, no, I'm not a cop. You say, oh, okay, here's what I'll do for you. And you start listing off things that read like letters to the editor of Penthouse back in the good old days. And you take the money and you go with him over to a nearby low-budget motel. As you walk in the door, he arrests you and pulls out a badge and says, I'm a cop, you're under arrest. And you say, but wait, I asked you if you were a cop, and you said no. You violated that magic rule about lying about being a cop. The question is whether or not he lied about being a cop. Isn't that entrapment? Well, it would be entrapment possibly if the facts were different and the person walking up to you somehow encouraged you to break a law in a way that you weren't already proposing to break the law. But how did that person's status as a police officer or not being a police officer change the underlying facts that lead to entrapment? You can't say, well, I was entrapped simply because this person's a cop and I didn't know it. That's got nothing to do with it. Entrapment's a whole different ballgame, which I'm not going to get into. I might do a video on it in the future, but that's not the point. The point is the police officer saying, I am not a cop, versus a person who's not a cop saying, I'm not a cop, doesn't change the facts that would lead to entrapment. So that wouldn't do it either. So this idea that you can walk up to a police officer who's undercover or not in uniform and say, are you a police officer? That he has to say yes to you is nonsense. Now, it is promoted by movies. I've seen it in movies. I can't think of any right now, but I know it's been in movies. And I've also seen it in movies where the cops go, no, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Of course we can lie. And the police can lie about all kinds of stuff. And so the funny thing is that many people have now come to understand, yes, the police can lie to you. They can lie to you about all kinds of stuff. They can lie to you. They can lie to you all day long. Doesn't hurt them. Now, when you lie to them, it might hurt you because they might use it against you and say, well, this person lied to us. What are they trying to hide? Whatever. But the idea that police can lie to you all day long is something most people can now accept. But for some odd reason, many people have this one exception in their head to go, well, they can't lie about being a cop. Well, they can lie about everything. They can lie about everything, okay? They can lie about being a cop. They can lie about having confessions. They can lie about having evidence. They can lie about why they've arrested you. That's all good, according to the U.S. Supreme Court. So, are you a cop? You can ask, but they don't have to tell you the truth, whether or not they are. So there you have it. Question is, are you a cop? Will not help you in determining whether or not, in fact, a person is a police officer. There you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.